Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our service from the Unitarian Society of Northampton and Florence. I'm Barbara Smith, a member of the Stewardship Committee. If you are new or returning after a time, we're glad to see you. Please feel free to fill out a blue welcome card, which you can put in the offering plate later in the service. There is a link to an online version in the chat. We'll put you on our email list, so you can receive information about all that we do. We strive to be a congregation that welcomes people of all ages, races, religious beliefs, backgrounds, sexual orientations, gender identities, and abilities. We belong to the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, and we are guided and inspired by its principles and values. Our values and principles move us to remember that those of us in the Pioneer Valley live on the unceded homeland of the Pocumtuck, Nonotuck, and Western Nipmuc peoples. We acknowledge our responsibility to confront the legacies of dispossession and systemic racism that are part of our collective history, and we affirm and celebrate the many legacies that inspire us. We have drawing materials and other ways to occupy hands on the tables in the back. The restrooms are downstairs and reach through one of these doors. You can either take the stairs or an elevator and return the same way. We're here to celebrate, to reflect, and to support one another. It is good to be together. And now we'll begin our service.
Can you hear? Can you hear the whispers of ancestors? Their stories are in the walls, in our bones, in the air that we breathe. Their stories are in the touch of the hand, in the melody of songs, in remembered faces and in faces we never knew. We hear the whispers of ancestors, and we seek to understand how their stories touch our own lives and call us into becoming. I invite you to rise in body or spirit, and Barbara will light our chalice. And we'll remain standing. We'll do the, no, we won't. Then we'll sit. We're going to have the story and then the hymn this time. We promise ourselves to the idea that we are each and all human beings, and that there is something moving between us that we cannot tame or measure. The chalice is a reminder that the flame we keep inside us cannot light the way. The light must spill to shine.
Good morning. Our story this morning is called The Stories from My Grandmother's Hands, and it's written by Resmaa Menakem. And some of you may have read Resmaa's book for adults called My Grandmother's Hands, which is about racism in the United States and how it lives in our bodies. And he's a therapist and offers a somatic response to dealing with the trauma of racism and white supremacy culture. This book is very different. It's a book written for children about the legacy of Black women in the United States and the enormous impact that they have on their children and on our culture. And it was a donation from one of our families. So it's a very special book. It's a limited edition if you want to go look for it. It's not easy to find. My Grandmother's Hands. My grandmother's hands are big like sunrise, with fingers thick and coarse, like the cornrows braided into her silver gray hair. My grandmother's hands picked cotton. My granny's hands rest on her belly as she hums and sighs, rocks and sways, like leaves swirling in the breeze. Wonder if these descriptions remind you of any of your ancestors or grandmothers. My grandmother's hands left handprints on my heart. My big mama's hands cook collard greens, macaroni and cheese, and fried chicken, and make pitchers of fresh squeezed lemonade. You can see some of her ingredients, like Crisco. My grandmother's hands sure could cook. My abuela's hands turn the pages of books that lull me to sleep with stories of far-off lands and magical kingdoms. My grandmother's hands taught me to dream big. My Gigi's hands type beautiful messages, send heartfelt well wishes, and place stamps with brown faces on cards to family and friends. And I don't know if you can see, but this grandmother is writing the 1619 project. For those of you who are familiar with it. Just a little project. My grandmother's hands held memories. My avo's hands cradle my face pinch my cheeks and make me smile out loud. There's just a footnote to say that avô comes from Brazilian culture or Portuguese language. My grandmother's hands brought me joy. My Oma's hands snap and clap, brushing against one another, while she taps her feet and laughs like fireworks. And Oma's from South Africa, Afrikaans or Dutch. My grandmother's hands made music. My Nana's hands push and pull, glide and guide me down curvy sidewalks toward spaces where I can pause and be still. Nana comes from Nigerian or British. My grandmother's hands showed me how to soothe my soul. My Gran's hands make shadow puppets and finger paint gardens of colorful flowers. And Gran comes from Haitian Creole or French. My grandmother's hands were creative. Looks like she's doing some collage. My grandmother's hands wrap me up in a blanket of love and plant me in the now like a deeply rooted tree. My grandmother's hands always reminded me to breathe.
Now I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn number 1051, We Are. now it is time to greet one another. You can turn around first and say hello to everyone on Zoom. Hello, everyone on Zoom. And then turn and greet your neighbor.
Hello, everybody. Hi. Hello, everybody. Hi. Out there in Zoom land. Nice to have you here with us this morning. I think you can unmute yourselves and say hi now.
Hello, I'm
Hi.
here in Barbados.
Good morning.
Hi.
Wow.
Oh,
Good morning,
Barbados.
everybody.
Wow.
Wow. Hi,
I'm here in
everybody.
South Carolina.
oh, from all over.
Yeah.
I'm back from Spain.
Wow.
We're all travelers we have here. Isn't it great? We've got Zoom.
It is great.
Yeah, Jan. Enjoy. That's very nice. Okay, mute yourselves again and turn off your screens.
Yeah.
Now it's time for everyone who is going to religious education activities to leave us, and we will sing you out. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere you may go. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you
Good morning. I'm Molly Hale. I'm a member of the Climate Action Group, and in this Social Justice Minute, I'm representing USNF Youth. This is a Social Justice Minute which recognizes that our faith calls us powerfully to action on social justice and the environment. USNF has the only public compost bin in Northampton. Our youth group created this amazing community resource in 2020 in order to reduce waste and help the environment. You've probably noticed that you can get compostable packaging at several restaurants and cafes downtown, but without a compost receptacle, it just becomes waste. Our youth group wanted to fix that problem, and that is why we have our very own compost bin right on the front lawn. Help spread the word to area businesses about this simple way to reduce waste and care for our planet. People of all ages are invited to participate. This Thursday afternoon, we will meet here at the Meeting House from 2 to 4 p.m. to spread out and canvass cafes and restaurants. For kids, we will meet from 1 to 5 p.m. to give parents and caregivers a break during February school vacation. We have also created a colorful poster for businesses to post to inform customers that they can use this public bin, and we will be giving them an opportunity to get on our list of participating shops and restaurants and bakeries. This will be fun. You can email compost@uunorthampton.org to learn more, or just come to our side door on Thursday at 2 p.m.
Good morning. I'm Rick King, and I've been a UU for over 20 years. Started attending USNF by Zoom in the fall of 2020 and became a member in 2022. I'm now a member of the board, a small group facilitator and steward for this year's campaign. I was approached separately by both the nominating and the stewardship committees to give a testimonial about why I give both my time and money to USNF. So you're in for a twofer. But for me, there's one overarching theme, and that's community. And curiously, I live over an hour and a half away between here and Boston, and yet that's what I've found here at USNF. For the past 7 years, my husband Pete and I have had plans to move to the area, which we hope will become reality within the next year. And knowing that, I took advantage of the pandemic, take that COVID, and visited by Zoom, thinking I would just learn a little bit more about what would likely become my future church home. Well, I never left. It's a treat to be here this morning in person. However, most of my USNF interactions, whether for meetings or services, are held by Zoom. What a game changer. Not only does Zoom help overcome barriers to participation related to pandemics, driving, or distance, it's a powerful tool for building community. I've experienced that in after services Zoom social hours, board meetings, small groups, and other programs. Community is in part about simply getting to know one another and developing friendships, and I've certainly done that here. But there's more to it than that. Community makes me a better person. I learn way more about a topic than I could ever figure out on my own by participating in board meetings. Whether we're discussing the eighth principle, a policy, or the installation of heat pumps. And by participating in a small group, whether we're talking about generosity, hope, love, authenticity, or mortality. That's the power of sharing information, history, vision, and our stories with one another. This community makes me a better person by helping me think about and act upon my values. For example, this community gives me constructive ways to learn, think, and act about racism. This community enables me to take action to promote and protect our democracy through postcarding. This community empowers me to reduce our environmental impact. So that's why I give, and that's why I participate, since I need this community. I suspect many of you do too. So if you're asked to serve, and if you have yet to pledge, I urge you to say yes, and to dig as deeply as you can to support this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Every week we take an offering to support the work of this church, this congregation, and half of the proceeds of our offering go to organizations outside our community. And those are listed on the screen, the ones that we're currently supporting. So everything we do here is made possible by your generosity, by all of our generosity. Morning offering will now be given and very gratefully received. Our meditation this morning is a brief poem called Prelude to Spring by Polly Murray. When I consider how this frozen field will hold within its harrowed breast a seed, which shall in time yield bread for hungering mouths, I am at peace. Earth has her need of rain, and I of tears. Take a moment together in silence. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper was born in 1826 to free Black parents in Baltimore. She was an abolitionist, she was a suffragist, she was a writer and orator. She wrote poems and fiction that served the causes that she championed. And the poem of hers that I've chosen to read this morning is The Plaint of a Fallen Woman, that she called Double Standard. Harper was also a member of the Unitarian Church in Philadelphia and also of one of the American Methodist Episcopal churches, the Black church in the same city. She wasn't a Universalist, but you may hear just a little bit of Universalist theology in this poem. Again, it's called Double Standard. Do you blame me that I loved him? If, when standing all alone, I cried for bread in a careless world, pressed my lips to a stone, do you blame me that I loved him? That my heart beat glad and free when he told me in the sweetest tones that he loved only me? Can you blame me that I did not see beneath his burning kiss the serpent's wiles, nor hear the deadly adder's hiss? Can you blame me that my heart grew cold, that the tempted tempter turned, when he was feted and caressed and I was coldly spurned? Would you blame the world if it should press on him a civic crown and see me struggling in the depth and then harshly press me down? Crime has no sex, and yet today I wear the brand of shame, while he, amid the gay and proud, still bears an honored name. Can you blame me if I've learned to think your hate of vice a sham, when you so coldly crushed me down and then excused the man? Would you blame me if tomorrow the coroner should say, a wretched girl, outcast, forlorn, has thrown her life away? I'm glad God's ways are not our ways. He does not see as man. Within his love, I know there's room for those whom others ban. I think before his great white throne, his throne of spotless light, that whited sepulchres shall wear the hue of endless night. That I who fell and he who sinned shall reap as we have sown. That each the burden of their loss must bear and bear alone. No golden weights can turn the scale of justice in God's sight, and what is wrong in woman's life, in man's, cannot be right. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn number 99, No One Knows the Trouble I've Seen. So last week, we heard a rich and very far-ranging reflection from David Ragland that began with an evocation of ancestors, the people who lived on these lands before the English colonists arrived, his own grandmothers, a million souls drowned in the Atlantic on the passage from Africa to the Americas. There is a conversation after the service today. Some of you have been reading the book on reparations and repentance and repair by Danya Ruttenberg, and that's a continuation of that conversation. And also anyone who's just interested in talking about some of the ideas that David Ragland presented last week, whether or not you've read the book. In fact, anyone, whether or not you've read the book, is welcome to that conversation. So that's in the parlor at 11:15. There's a man named Hamza Zafar, who's a professor of Arabic and African languages and culture at the University of Washington. And he has explored and thought about ancestry in the context of his own family and culture. Zafar is Pakistani and a Muslim, and he talks about the stories he grew up with about his own ancestors, where his parents told him their families had come from. And then he talks about what he discovered when he sent his DNA off to the company he used was 23andMe to find out what his ancestry was really biologically by looking at his DNA. And there were some surprises, some things that were inconsistent with the stories that his parents had told him and believed. So it just caused him to reflect that ancestry is not only biological again, but also, he says, ideological and political. And I also heard about a book that has not been released yet called Ancestors, the names that bless us, curse us, and hold us. It's written by William H. Lamar IV, who is the senior pastor of the nearly 2,000 member Metropolitan AME Church in Washington, D.C. And that's one of the biggest Black churches in Washington. W.E.B. Du Bois, it's an old church. W.E.B. Du Bois has spoken there. I.W. Wells spoke there. Rosa Parks, there was a memorial service for Rosa Parks there. So it's a well-known historic church. Lamar writes that ancestors have an important hand in human affairs, motivating individuals and cultural developments. And he says the US is a nation that doesn't often use the word ancestor. In our culture, we don't use the word ancestor very much. But he says by failing to name the ancestors who bless us, as well as the ones that dehumanize us, we harm ourselves, our communities, and our country. And he goes on to say that by choosing our ancestors, we choose the stories we tell about ourselves and choose the kind of humans we want to be. Can we really choose our ancestors? If you think about it, it feels a little bit mystical to me. And I also think it's a more personal way to think about our relationship to history and our responsibilities for the present and future. Maybe a way to think more deeply about someone we admire from history as more than someone we admire, but claiming a relation. It's something to think about. Who might you choose as an ancestor? Or who have you chosen? So today, because it's Black History Month and because the theme of the month is justice and equity, I've decided to talk about Black women who fought for justice. Briefly, some of the ones we've mentioned before, I've even done whole sermons on at least one of them. One of them is Ruby Bridges in 1960. You know the story. 6-year-old Ruby was the first child to integrate an all-white school in the South, in New Orleans Elementary School. And for a year, she was the only child in her classroom, taught by a woman named Barbara Henry, who was the only teacher willing to teach a Black child. Ruby Bridges, she's about my age. She's 69 now. Ruby Bridges has been a lifelong advocate for racial equality, and in 1999, she established the Ruby Bridges Foundation to promote tolerance and create change through education. She does a lot of public speaking in support of racial understanding and equality. Another woman is Fannie Lou Hamer. In 1962, Hamer, who was a Mississippi sharecropper's wife, tried to register to vote. She lost her job for trying. She didn't succeed because she couldn't read and interpret the Mississippi Constitution to the satisfaction of the examiners. But she lost her job for trying. She went back, she studied the Mississippi Constitution for a month and went back to the courthouse where she successfully passed the test and registered. Her husband then lost his job, and they were threatened in various ways, frequently. But Fannie Lou Hamer became a leader in the Student National Nonviolent Committee, SNCC. She led civil rights protests and gave speeches. Later on, she ran several times for office. She fought for fair representation and voting rights for the rest of her life. And Polly Murray, whose poem I read earlier for the meditation, and who I did talk about I don't know when it was, several years ago. Polly Murray was born in 1910. She was a writer, a lawyer, a legal scholar, a civil rights activist, who later in life became an Episcopal priest. And she battled discrimination based on race and gender. She was probably transgender for the most of her life. On a bus trip from New York to visit her family in North Carolina, Murray and a friend resisted the driver's demands that they sit in the colored section, and this earned them 3 days in a Virginia jail. A few years later, she applied to study law at Howard. She contributed to a debate about segregation, this was at Howard, by suggesting that an argument against it could be made by demonstrating that the facilities or institutions provided for non-whites were in fact unequal. Her scholarship led to more research on relevant state laws and decisions based on that idea, and that work was widely used by the NAACP and other civil rights lawyers, including Thurgood Marshall. He used a lot of those arguments in winning the case for school desegregation in Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954, which of course was the decision that led Ruby Bridges to the steps of that New Orleans elementary school 8 years later. And as you heard, Polly Murray was also a poet. This is a poem that she wrote in the 1940s. Not by hammering the furious word, nor bread stamped in streets, nor milk emptied in gutters shall we gain the gates of the city. I am a prophet without eyes to see. I do not know how we shall gain the gates of the city. So those women, Ruby Bridges, Fannie Lou Hamer, Polly Murray, they didn't know if or how or when they might gain the gates of the city, but they kept trying. There are others that we should know more about and might want to choose as ancestors if we dare. In 2018, the New York Times began a biography series called Overlooked, which some of you may know about. I was not aware of it. And they started it in an effort to balance their 170-year bias in their obituary reporting, a bias that meant that they rarely acknowledged or chronicled the lives of women or people of color. And one of the subjects of that series is Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, whose poem Double Standard we heard earlier. That New York Times biography begins this way. On May 8th, 1866, with the Civil War over, key supporters of the women's suffrage movement gathered in a church in the Union Square section of Manhattan with the goal of refocusing the nation's attention on extending the ballot to women. Now in the Reconstruction is the opportunity, perhaps of the century, to base our government on the broad principles of equal rights to all. That was Elizabeth Cady Stanton, one of the movement's leaders, and that was part of her speech to the convention. Later that morning, however, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, who was the lone Black person to speak that day, challenged the room. "Until the nation was colorblind," she said, "true democracy remained far from reach. You white women speak here of rights," she said. "I speak of wrongs." And in the same speech, she also said, "Justice is not fulfilled so long as woman is unequal before the law. We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity, and society cannot trample on the weakest and feeblest of its members without receiving the curse in its own soul." Now, later she broke with the main branch of the suffrage movement because she sided with W.E. Du Bois and others and agreed that it was more important for some Blacks to get the vote than to insist that women were included. And so she supported the movement for Black men suffrage, and that lost her approval by the more radical and other ways one could characterize the other women in the movement. So Harper, as I said, was born to free Black parents in 1826 in Baltimore. She went to school until she was in her mid-teens, and then she had to go out to work. But she continued to read widely and write for the rest of her life. And when she stood before that women's rights convention in 1866, she had been speaking out for the past 20 years. She was on abolitionist lecture circuits, and she spoke in churches. She was a published essayist by then, a poet, and the first African-American woman to have a short story published. And she was well known in the 19th century for her poetry, and though a lot of it is very challenging and hard to read. She was a member, as I said, of both an AME church and a Unitarian church in Philadelphia. And there's an article in the UU World in 2015 that notes that Harper believed the struggles for Black Americans and women of all races were connected. And her writing and advocacy were largely forgotten until scholars and Unitarian Universalists, according to the article, resurrected her legacy in the last 25 years. So she started working as a teenager as a live-in nurse and a seamstress for a white family, where luckily she had the use of a good library, and they encouraged her to read and to write. When she turned 18, she began teaching at a small seminary for Blacks in Ohio. Seminary was just another word for a school. Shortly thereafter, Maryland passed a law that made any Black person coming into the state of Maryland subject to seizure and sale into slavery. So the fact that she had been born free in Maryland did not protect her. She was at risk if she returned to her home. And so it wasn't safe for her to return home. So she continued then to travel. She earned a living through her writing and for fees from her abolitionist lecture tours. In 1860, she married a man named Fenton Harper, who had 3 children. They bought a farm in Ohio with money that she had earned and saved. And in 1862, they had a daughter together. And then 2 years later, Fenton Harper died. And his wife discovered that he had been deeply in debt before she knew him. The farm and all of their possessions were seized, and she had no way to keep that family together. She had a 2-year-old and 3 older children. So she was forced to leave her stepchildren, to whom she'd been a mother for 4 years, with relatives of theirs in Ohio, and brought her daughter with her to Philadelphia, which was a city where she had friends and relatives. And then she went out and resumed her career as a lecturer. New York Times piece also tells us that during Reconstruction, she traveled to nearly every southern state to lecture and to teach former slaves to read. She railed against the lynching of Black people in the South. This was a little later. And her activism made her a mentor to the future and anti-lynching activist Ida B. Wells Barnett. So at last June's General Assembly, that's the UU big meeting, Imani Perry was one of the featured speakers. Perry's the author of Breathe, A Letter to My Sons, and more recently a book called South to America. And she reflected that Harper's witness and testimony through her poetry, her lectures, her fiction, her essays, all reveal the classism, sexism, and racism of the society Harper lived in. And, says Perry, they remind us of the similarities in our own society today, well over 100 years later. My colleague Lynn Gardner's words we heard at the beginning of the service. Can you hear? Can you hear the whispers of ancestors? Can you hear their stories? We hear their whispers as we seek to understand how their stories touch our lives and call us into becoming. So Frances Ellen Watkins Harper was a woman of great courage, amazing, unfathomable courage, who did not keep that flame inside, but let it spill and shine. She lived in an era where Black human beings were almost universally understood by whites to be inferior and unclean, one in which respectable women were expected to refrain from speaking in public. And she defied the prejudice and conventions of her time and used her voice and her gifts to champion what she knew was right. Actually, I really don't feel worthy to call her my ancestor, but I'm wondering, and I challenge you with this question, if I did claim her and others like her, what might that do to me? So I'm going to end with something by Kathleen McTeague, who's a UU minister who served in New Haven, Connecticut for about 20 years. And then she directed the UU College of Social Justice. She's now retired. Kathleen wrote, "In the struggles we choose for ourselves, in the ways we move forward in our lives and bring our world forward with us, it is right to remember the names of those who gave us strength in our choice of living. It is right to name the power of hard lives well lived. We share a history with those lives and we belong to the same motion. They too were strengthened by what had gone before. They too were drawn on by the vision of what might come to be. Those who lived before us and struggled for justice and suffered injustice before us have not melted into the dust and have not disappeared. They are with us still. The lives they lived hold us steady. Their words remind us and call us back to ourselves. Their courage and love evoke our own. We, the living, carry them with us. We are their voices, their hands, and their hearts. We take them with us, and with them, we choose the deeper path of living." May it be so. We're going to do something new this morning. We're going to sing a song we haven't sung before. So, take courage, my friends. It's 10:28. Yeah, it's 10:28. You might want to look at the music if you read music. And if you don't, you're better off because you won't get hung up on the funny little dots and things. You'll just get it. So either way, please rise in body or spirit and join in singing.
Thank you.
guys are good. We are a singing congregation. What a blessing. Our closing words come from Reverend Kiyama Raman. Now is the time to call on the memories of the ancestors who thought they could not walk another step toward freedom, and yet they did. Time to make them proud and show them and ourselves what we are made of. Did you not know that we would have to change places? It is that time and that place to know that it is our turn, that we must leave a legacy for our children, a legacy for all the children. Go in peace.
I just want to thank Naomi Leslie for joining me today.